So what do you think of my new look? Negotiation is a central part of life. It's one of the most important things that you're going to be doing in your life. Frankly, you're negotiating every day. I'm not talking about like negotiating like a big business deal where you're sitting at a conference table, you know, your counterpart across from you at the table, and you're trying to, you know, score a better deal, a better position or what have you. No. I'm talking about the little bargains that you do every day, the little negotiations that are necessary for life. Think of you going to the movies with your girlfriend. You know, you're gay, so you want to see a romantic comedy, and she's a butch, and so she wants to see an action picture. Yeah, of course, but you know, you come to some middle ground, right? You see what I'm saying? You negotiate the issue. Like, for instance, every night I have to negotiate with my kids, you know, what time is bedtime? Yeah, and they insist that they want to stay up a little longer and this and that, and we trade and negotiate, and finally, you know, I get them into bed after a whole host of haggling. I mean, it's like negotiating nuclear weapons deals, for crying out loud, just to get the little suckers into bed. But you see my point, of course. You know, you're constantly negotiating. And so here's the first thing that you have to know insofar as negotiation. You have to look into the heart of your negotiating counterpart and look at how them view you. Yeah, because see, you can only really negotiate with people who respect you. Or maybe they don't even respect you, but they respect your priorities. They respect and, more importantly, understand what is motivating you. You have to see in your counterpart that he appreciates what's important to you. And yeah, he's going to try to leverage certain positions and try to get the best out of you. Of course he will, because that's just perfectly natural. That's how people are, right? But you have to recognize whether the guy you are talking to, the person you are negotiating with, if they understand what your priorities are, if they respect those priorities, if they understand that your priorities are not a bad thing. That's key. That's key, because if they don't understand your point of view, you're not going to get anywhere with any kind of negotiation. Okay? A lot of times, you know, a good negotiator will sort of like try to hide what's important to them, and that's a negotiating strategy. But I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the strategies to get the best out of a negotiation. I'm talking about a baseline understanding of what you want and what they want, and a respect for what you want, and you, of course, respecting what they want. You see what I'm saying? Because if you don't have this baseline respect, it's not that you're not going to get anywhere with the negotiation. You won't. What'll happen is that if you try to negotiate with these people, they'll fuck you over. It's as simple as that. They will fuck you over because they don't really respect what you want, and they just want to win. Okay? And with such people, you cannot get ahead. How can I put this? I'm being really vague here. So let's pin it down. Let's talk about a specific aspect. Let's talk about progressives, shall we? See, the problem with progressives in the Western democracies today is that they think that the priorities and the important things and the important bullet points of their opposition are without merit. See? That's the bottom line. They think that everything that people who are opposed to progressives have to say, and all the things that they want, are bad. Because you see, progressives believe that they own the truth. Progressives believe that they are the owners and masters of all that is good and true, and anybody who differs from them is just an evil bastard. An evil bastard who deserves to be buried. That's what they think. You can't negotiate with such people. You cannot negotiate with such people. You will get nowhere with such people. Such people who believe that they own the truth and that their side is the righteous side necessarily implies that they believe that everybody else is wrong, and not only wrong, evil. They will think that you are evil. And so they will try to fuck you over. They will try to fuck you over and hurt you. And a lot of times, they will try to hurt you, not because it improves their situation, but just because they want to hurt you, because hurting you is good, because it's fighting evil. That's the problem with these fucking progressives. And that's why progressivism is a disaster for democracy. Fuck yeah, yeah. If progressives don't understand the notion of compromise, because in every effective democracy, in order for the democracy to be effective, for people of disparate objectives to all live together in an orderly society that advances and progresses, well, you have to have all sides respecting one another, understanding that, you know, that Republican over there and that Democrat over there, it's not that they think different things out of malice, but rather they think different things and have different priorities because their situations are different. And because they recognize, everybody recognizes that their situation is different, they try to come to compromises because they recognize that in order for people with disparate objectives to live together, they have to negotiate, they have to compromise. And that's the problem with progressives. See, they cannot compromise. They cannot negotiate because from their point of view, in their minds, what they believe is the only thing that is true, and everybody else is not just wrong, but evil. Imagine you're negotiating with Satan. Satan is the embodiment of evil, or better yet, if you don't believe in hell and heaven and all the rest of it, imagine you're negotiating with Hitler, right? The secular version of Satan, right? You're negotiating with Hitler, right? And so what do you think? You're thinking, well, Hitler is evil, so I will oppose everything because he's the embodiment of evil, and anything that he wants is necessarily bad. But what say you're negotiating with Hitler, and this is like 1935 in Germany, right? And you're the head of the Reichstag, and Hitler is the chancellor, and you think that he's evil. But, Hitler wants to create the Autobahn, a highway system unifying the whole country. Would you oppose him? Well, if you think that he's evil, of course you will, because anything that he says is bad, and so you have to oppose him no matter how reasonable. And that's crazy. But that's what happens with people who do not respect you and do not respect your priorities. See, you can't negotiate with such people. You can never negotiate with such people. They will see everything that you want as wrong, as evil, as bad, and they will try to hamstring you. They will try to fuck you over. They will try to do whatever is necessary to stop you. And we're seeing this in real time in the political environment of the Western democracies. We're seeing how progressives shit on everybody who thinks different from them. And the problem, the great problem with these people is that mentality of no compromise, no negotiation, because all of our opponents are evil, well, that mentality has permeated the universities, the Silicon Valley C-suites, and it's starting to permeate Wall Street. It's starting to permeate the entire culture. And where do you think that that's going to end? See, because when you're negotiating with somebody who believes that you're completely evil, nothing good is going to come of it. You're not going to get into any compromise, right? Now, in a business setting, it's no big deal, because what will happen is that if you try to negotiate with such a man who thinks that his positions are the right ones and anybody else's is wrong, well, that individual will quickly find failure because nobody will want to make any deal with him, okay? And if you can't make a deal in the business world, i.e. negotiate with other people and come to a compromise and a mutually beneficial understanding, well, you quickly go out of business. So you don't see this attitude in business, okay? And that's a good thing, because business people, for pragmatic reasons, start paying attention to what their opponent wants and tries to work with them. Sometimes in a Machiavellian way, but sometimes in an honest and direct way, because they recognize that if they help their counterpart in the negotiation, they themselves get ahead. But in politics, it's a different story. In a democracy, it's a different story. I'm a great believer in negotiation. I'm a great believer in compromise. I'm not saying that you should compromise the things that are truly important to you. I'm not saying that you should give up the ghost on all the things that you hold dear. But I am saying that, a lot of times you have to look at what the other guy is thinking, look at what the other guy believes, look at the other guy's priorities, and put yourself in his shoes and recognize that what he's believing, what he is aiming for is not unreasonable. And were you in his position, you would probably be advocating the same thing. So my position is put yourself in the other guy's shoes. Always be doing that. Put yourself in the other guy's shoes to see what is important to him and why. And often as not, if you do that little simple mental exercise, you will get a lot farther ahead. Because you'll be able to work with your opponent, your counterpart, your negotiating partner, whatever you want to call him, and both of you can make out ahead. See? That's the beauty of negotiation. You negotiate properly with an open mind and careful to think of the priorities of the other. And you can both get ahead. Now, I'm realizing as I'm recording this that this video came out a little bit fucked up because I wanted to talk about negotiation and how important it is to compromise, and I brought up this issue of politics and progressivism, and it sort of like derailed this video a little bit, at least insofar as my platonic ideal of what I wanted it to be, right? Smirk. But I hope you get the picture, and I hope you understand why it's so important to put yourself in the other guy's shoes and recognize that, you don't own the truth and he doesn't own the truth. But the problem is, of course, in the culture that we're currently involved in, and I'm picking my words carefully, of course, well, in this current environment, there's little compromise. And it seems to me quite clear that there's one significant portion of the population that just does not believe in compromise for the reasons I mentioned before. They do believe that all their opponents are evil and that they own the truth and they own the moral high ground in every regard, in every issue. And so these people who will not negotiate, well, what do you do with them? Because that's the question really. What do you do with such people? With such people who are intransigent, with such people who are so arrogant as to think that they own the truth, who are so full of themselves that they believe that they are good and everybody else is bad. What do you do with such people? You avoid them. You avoid them, yeah. I mean, that's what business people do with somebody who is an intransigent negotiator. You're a businessman and you come across a guy who will not cede because he thinks that he's always right and that his position is the only one. You just blow him off and you tell him to fuck off and move on to the next guy. And the next guy will probably make a deal with you, right? But when it comes to politics, when it's not that easy, especially when there is a movement of people, a significant minority, yes, but with significant numbers, enough numbers to be non-trivial, enough numbers to be determinate. Well, what do you do with such people? Well, when you come across such people, it seems to me that if you can't blow them off, you got to stamp them out. By any means necessary, in that famous progressive phrase. You got to stamp them out. Because such people who are unwilling to negotiate, such people who are unwilling to put themselves in the shoes of the other guy, such people who believe that they own the truth and everybody else is evil, well, they themselves are willing to commit awful acts of evil, and we've seen them before, now haven't we? I studied the Russian Revolution in college. Yeah, I studied it quite carefully, as a matter of fact. And what struck me about the Bolsheviks, of course, is that, I thought that they were evil people, but they didn't view themselves as evil. Oh no, not even Joe Stalin or Vladimir Lenin. They thought that they were the good guys. They thought that they were the good guys, and they acted as such. They thought that they were the good guys. They acted as such. And in their mind, in their own eyes, from their own eyes, they believed that everybody else was evil. And that's the thing that strikes you when you study the Bolsheviks. Yeah. They honestly and truly believed that all of the Russian princes were evil, all of the Russian bourgeois were evil, all of the kulaks were evil. They believed this Manichaean view of the world, of good people and bad people, white hats and black hats. They believed it, and the Bolsheviks were completely and utterly convinced that they were on the moral high ground and that history would view them as saviors and saints. And that's why they had no problem whatsoever sending tens of millions of people to their deaths in concentration camps all across the Soviet Union, all across China, all across Cambodia. They had no problem whatsoever because they were sure that they were right, and they were going to impose their truth, their rightness, their goodness by any means necessary. You hear somebody say that phrase, by any means necessary, and you know what you have to do. You got to stamp them out. You got to avoid them if you can, and if you can't avoid them, you got to stamp them out. Because those fuckers, well, if you don't stamp them out, they're going to stamp you out.